when you are looking at retirement in the near future, the most important thing to consider is income. This is where most financial advisors fail you because they don't want to address income. Income is a problem for them. They just want to address accumulation. And when you get ready to retire, we'll talk about how you're going to draw income out, which is usually 4% a year, giving yourself a pay raise, no matter what the market does. No guarantees that your money will not run out. You don't want to retire without a guarantee that you will never run out of money. That's why creating your own personal pension plan is the most important thing you can do as you prepare for retirement. This is Victor Cuevas with Victor for Advice, and I want to show you very quickly how creating your own personal pension plan can work. Stay tuned. In this example, I'm using an annuity from Allianz called a 222 annuity. This particular annuity, it's a fixed index annuity. You have to have your money in there for 10 years, and then you can start drawing income out. So this is a 10-year plan. Some you can start taking annuity, you can start taking income that first year, or you wait a year. In this particular case, with this example, this is if you have a 10-year time period, which allows your money to grow a lot more. So let's suppose you're 63 years old and you say, okay, I want to put a certain amount of my retirement money into this personal pension type annuity and let it run for 10 years. And then when I'm 73, when I'm supposed to be taking my required minimum distributions, I'll kick in that income for life. All right. So in this particular annuity, when you put the money in, you get a 45% bonus onto the amount of money you put in for income purposes for your personal pension plan. What do I mean by that? Well, if let's suppose someone's got $600,000 and they want to segregate $250,000 and say, I want this to be guaranteed income that can never run out no matter what. I'll take my chances with the rest of my money. I would argue that you would need, if you have a $650,000 portfolio, you need to put in more than $250, but I'm just going to go with the $250. In this particular annuity, you get a 45% bonus. So when I run the calculation, $250,000 plus 45%, instantly you have a bucket of $362,500 in your income bucket. I like to call it your personal pension bucket. Now, is that $362,000 in cash you can walk away with? No, we're not interested in the actual cash value, my friends. We're interested in income, in creating a pension plan. That's the important part of this strategy. So now you have $362,500. We've got 10 years to grow. How is that going to grow? All right. So now with a fixed index annuity, the interest you receive every year is tied to a particular index, like the S&P 500 index. So and then with this particular annuity, every year that you receive interest, you get 150% of that interest added to this pension bucket. Let me explain how that works. So let's suppose that we use this S&P 500 index, and this particular one has a cap of 5.5%. So that means that no matter what the S&P 500 does that year, you're going to make the 5.5%. So if it makes 10%, you're not going to get 10%, you're going to get 5.5%. If you get 2%, you're going to get 2%. So it's a conservative allocation here at 5.5%. However, if you were to return 5% that year, multiplied by 150%. Now 7.5% is added to the 362,500. Boom, you just went up. So you add the 7.5%. Now you have $389,687 in your pension bucket. You started with $250,000, and at the end of the first year, you're up to $389,000 plus in your pension that's going to be available for you to retire from later down the road. You with me on that so far? Now we have other indexes that we can use other than this very conservative 5.5% on the S&P. This PIMCO Tactical Balance can do anywhere from 3 to 10% in any given year, sometimes even more than that. And you can get 150% of that or 125% of that. And then, so you can, just suppose you get 10% that year. Well, now you have 15% added to your pension bucket. But let's be conservative and stick with this very low, very conservative indexing at 5.5%. Now the S&P is going to be positive 7 out of 10 years on average. And in those 7 years, just about every time it's going to be double digits. So let's suppose that happens and you get, for 7 out of those 10 years, you get 5.5% credit added to this account. What does that look like? Well, you take the 5.5% plus the 150% that you're going to get the income bonus on, and now you got 8.25%. So let's do the math. So if we get 8.25% added to our pension bucket for 7 years, that's 57.75%. We'll divide that by 10 years, just in case we get 3 years that we don't have any interest credit at all because the index is negative. And we have 5.77% a year. Well, let's look at what that would amount to over a 10-year period. So I do an average of 5.75% a year for 10 years at $362,500. That's the $250,000 plus the 45%. And we end up with this particular client from 62 to 73. At 73 years of age, he's got a pension, a personal pension of $634,032. You started out with $250,000 10 years ago. Now he can retire from drawing income from $635,032. I want you to think about that for a minute. Can you do that by putting your money, leaving your money in the market with a financial advisor? No. It would be a miracle if you could turn $250,000 into $634,000 after all the fees you got to pay to a typical financial advisor. Just not going to happen. Sorry, but you're not going to get there. You're going to average, maybe after fees, 7% a year. All right, so if you got $634,032 in your pension bucket, now you might have some people say, well, heck, if I just left it in the $250 in the market, I'd do better than that. Well, let's look at that. According to Smart Assets in their article here in May of this year, many retirement planners suggest a typical 401k portfolio generates an average annual return of 5 to 8% based on market conditions. However, your 401k returns may depend on different factors, so forth and so on. For instance, in 2020, the S&P fell nearly 20%, while bonds had their worst year on record. So if I click on that, I see here that in 2022, the bond index was the worst year since they started recording in 1976. Now, I want you to listen to this. Bonds are supposed to be safe money. I'm a safe money guy. And I used to be in the securities world over 20 years. Bonds aren't safe. They're conservative, but they're not necessarily safe. And in 2022, the bond market went down 13%. Safe money going 13%. Folks, if you have a portfolio of investments and you've got 30 or 40% in bonds, I would just make a common sense suggestion. I'm not giving you investment advice, but you might want to look at moving that 30 or 40% of your bonds into a fixed index annuity where if the market tanks, you won't lose any money. But if the market is positive, you'll make money. And you can be conservative and get 4, 5, or 6%. Still beats bonds, which maybe you get 3%, and now you don't even get that. I mean, we go back over here, 5 to 8%, and remember, you're looking at typical 1.5% of fees. I'm just going to say, well, let's just go with generous and say you're going to return in your 401k over the next 10 years 7%. Not likely, but let's say you do. So you get 7%, 7 years out of the 10 gives you 49%. Divide that by 10, and now you have a 4.9% average over 10 years in your 401k after all the fees. You say, Victor, that's not reasonable. Yes, it is. Because in 2022, the market went down 20%. The average 401k did that because remember the stocks were down almost 20% and the bonds were down 13%. So your typical 401k is 60% stocks and 40% bonds plus the fees. Yeah, you got hammered. And then if you lose 20%, you need 25% the next year to break even. That didn't happen. In 2023, the bond market still really hasn't recovered. So there's 2 years right there. You're in the hole. And the fees are still coming out. You've got 2 years straight you're negative with fees coming out. Now in 2024, you really had to crank it out. You got some good returns, but in 2025, you gave it all back. So, yeah, I think 4.9%. What did I say? So 4.9%, let's just round it off to 5%. And if I come over here and I want to use 5% on $250,000, you're looking at 449. So you would do very well. In fact, the typical financial advisor is considered basically a hero if he can double your money in 10 years. So if you drop $250,000 and you end up with $500,000 in a 401k at the end of 10 years, and that's just not, this is a 401k you're not adding money to. This is just, you're moving from point A to point B. I'm going to put it over here in this market account and see what I can do, or I can put it into this fixed index annuity with an income rider and see what I can do over the next 10 years for my future income. So you end up at 449. Let's just give you $500,000. So then, now it's time to draw income. You're 73 years old and you're going to draw income. what does that look like? So again, your typical financial advisor will not allow you to draw more than 4% out of your account, or you'll run out of money. More than likely, you'll run out of money. What's 4% of 500,000? $20,000. There's your income, $20,000. Well, let's go back to the annuity that's now got a pension account on the conservative side of $634,032. But this particular annuity on joint withdrawal, this means you have a spouse and you want to include the spouse in your income, takes you down to 5% you can draw out of this account. So now you're looking at 5% of 634,032. That's $31,701 a year, guaranteed for the rest of the married couple's lives. If one couple one of the spouses dies, the remaining spouse will continue to get that income. It won't drop for the rest of her life. Even if the account runs out of money, the surviving spouse will continue to receive that income. But it gets better than that with this particular annuity. This 150% bonus, protected income value, this bonus pays out for life. Listen to me, it pays out for life. What does that mean? So now this person dropped in $250,000 at 63. With the bonus of 45% and the growth every year of 150% of whatever you earned in that account, now you're up to $634,000. You're taking out $31,000 of income, joint income, and every single year for the rest of their lives, if there is a positive movement in the index and that account is awarded interest rate, you add 150% to that, and now that couple gets a pay raise that year. Let me give you an example because I know it's sounding too good. See this fixed interest rate? Let's just leave it at fixed interest rate. And they say, well, you know, this year we're just going to take the 3%. So at the end of the 12 months, their annual anniversary, they're going to get 3% dropped into the account interest. But that 3% is going to get 150% bonus. So now their annual income is increased by 4.5%. Did you get that? They get a 4.5% raise. If they stuck with the fixed index for the rest of their lives, every single year, because this annuity will always pay some kind of interest, it could be less than 3%, it could be more than 3%. Every single year, they're going to get paid an interest rate, guaranteed, and they're going to get 150% of that as a pay raise, guaranteed. Now, some of these years in these indexes, they might make 10%, 5%, could even be a 13% year. Let's suppose they get a 10% year. Times 150%, they would get a 15% pay raise on their annual income for the rest of their lives. One spouse dies, the remaining spouse keeps getting those pay raises for the rest of her life. And when you get a pay raise locked in, you can't ever go below that. That's what you can do just with one annuity out there. There's a lot of different income annuities out there, or annuities with income riders that can work similarly. Not all of them give you pay raise. Some start at a higher income and stay constant for the rest of your life, and some, like this one, give you pay raises. So you can start at 31,000, and I don't know where you'll be at 73, at 85. They could be at $50,000 a year income or more. Who knows? But it's a way to keep ahead of inflation. And guess what, folks? You can't do that with your money in the market. You can't go to a financial advisor. I don't care if he's the best in the United States, and get this from him. First of all, he's going to be taking fees. Did you know this particular annuity doesn't even have any fees? Doesn't have any fees. So you can go to a typical financial advisor. He can't guarantee you pay raises. He can't guarantee you're not going to run out of money. He can't guarantee you that if you have a year like 2008, when the portfolio goes down 40% and your financial advisor isn't going to be able to stop it, that you're not going to have to take a pay cut. Because what the heck, I just went down 30 or 40%. How am I going to take $20,000 or $30,000 income that year? I'll really run out of money quick. I may have to cut myself back to $15,000 that year. Can't do that. I mean, that's the position you're in when you don't have a guaranteed stream of income that can never go down and can never run out. So folks, I'm just asking you, like I do in so many videos, use your common sense. And if you have all of your money in the market and you've got a financial advisor handling that account, and you're going to go into retirement and trust him or her to make sure you have an income for life, you are on very shaky ground, and that you can just figure out on your own. That doesn't even take a lot of thinking to realize you're on shaky ground. So if you're looking at retirement in the future, you may want to talk to me or somebody like me, a safe money guy that deals with income planning, and see what a fixed index annuity with an income rider can do for you. See if it makes sense for you, and protect yourself. This is Victor Cuevas with Victor for Advice. God bless.